You want to know what it feels like to watch your own father torch your future with a blowtorch in the backyard while the whole neighborhood watches? I'll tell you. It feels like the moment you realize the only person you ever wanted to love you has just declared war. And honey, I've never lost a war. My name's Reagan Cole, and 3 years ago I got into MIT's aerospace engineering program on a full tuition scholarship. Not partial. Full ride. The kind of golden ticket that trailer park girls from Alabama don't get. When I showed my old man the acceptance letter, the thick envelope with the crimson logo, he didn't even look at it. He walked out to the yard, fired up his propane blowtorch, the one he used for burning weeds off the gravel driveway, and held my future in that blue flame until it curled into black ash. My grandmother, 83 years old and meaner than a rattlesnake with a toothache, threw her walker at him from the porch. It didn't matter. He just stood there, this big slab of a man with hands like cinder blocks and a face carved from granite, watching the last page of my scholarship offer disintegrate into the Alabama wind. Then he turned to me, wiped his greasy fingers on his filthy work shirt, and delivered his verdict. You got a brain, girl, but you ain't got no sense. Wasting 4 years chasing rockets when you could marry Bobby Denton and give me grandbabies. I ain't paying 1 red cent for your delusions. You hear me? Not 1 red cent. Bobby Denton. The town's prize-winning hog farmer. A man who once tried to kiss me behind the gas station and missed my mouth entirely, landing his tobacco-stained lips somewhere on my left ear. He smelled like manure and cheap whiskey, and he had the intellectual depth of a mud puddle. That was my father's vision for my future. Pop out piglets for a pig farmer until my body gave out. The whole trailer park had come out to watch. The Dumonts from 2 lots over. Old Manchester with his oxygen tank. The Martinez kids peeking through the chain-link fence. 20 people standing in the dirt, watching my father immolate my dreams like it was Sunday night entertainment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give that bastard the satisfaction. I walked up to him, close enough to smell the diesel and sweat that permanently clung to his skin, and I looked him dead in the eye. My father was 6'4", 260 pounds of muscle and meanness, and I was 130 pounds soaking wet. But I'd inherited his stubbornness. Double the dose, probably. You listen to me, Buck Cole, I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. I'm going to MIT. I'm going to become an aerospace engineer. I'm going to build spacecraft that go further than your miserable ass has ever been. And I'm going to pay for every penny of it myself. You won't get the chance to hold this over my head, because I will never, ever ask you for a goddamn thing again. He laughed. Actually laughed. This dry, scraping sound like rocks grinding together. Good luck, princess. You couldn't pay for a bus ticket to Birmingham, let alone some fancy Yankee college. You'll be back in a month, begging for help. I turned to my grandmother, who was still cursing at my father in language that would make a sailor blush. Nana, I'll call you when I get there. She grabbed my arm with her bony fingers, her grip surprisingly strong. You get your ass to Massachusetts and you show every one of these ignorant bastards what a cool woman is made of. Your mama would be so proud. My mother. Dead 12 years from an aneurysm that took her in her sleep when I was 9. The only person in that trailer who'd ever believed in me without reservation. She used to take me out behind the trailer at night, away from the glare of the floodlights, and point up at the stars. You see all that, Reagan? That's the future. And you're gonna be part of it someday. She was gone, but her faith in me was still burning somewhere in my chest, right next to the rage my father had just ignited. I grabbed my duffel bag from the porch, the one I'd packed 3 days before when I knew this confrontation was coming. 2 changes of clothes. My mother's worn copy of an astronomy textbook. A photograph of her and me, taken at a county fair when I was 7. $237 I'd saved from cleaning motel rooms at the Sleepeasy and off the interstate. And a battered laptop held together with duct tape that I'd salvaged from the dump behind the high school. I didn't own much. But what I had was mine. As I walked down that dirt driveway for the last time, past the rusted-out Ford pickup that hadn't run since the Clinton administration, past the plastic lawn chairs my father sat in every evening drinking himself into a stupor, I heard him call out one more time. "You'll be back." They all come back. I didn't look back. I just raised my middle finger over my shoulder and kept walking. The Greyhound bus station was 4 miles away. I walked every step in the August heat, the duffel bag strap cutting into my shoulder, sweat soaking through my t-shirt. When I finally collapsed into a cracked plastic seat on the 11:15 p.m. bus to Boston, with 2 transfers and 36 hours of travel ahead of me, I made a promise to myself. I would graduate from MIT if it killed me. And if it did kill me, I'd come back as a ghost and haunt Buck Cole until he lost his goddamn mind. The bus pulled out of the station, and I watched Alabama slide past the window in the dark. Good riddance. 36 hours on a Greyhound bus gives you a lot of time to think. Too much time, really. By the time we hit Virginia, I'd mentally calculated my finances 17 different ways and every single calculation came up short. MIT's tuition was $55,000 a year. Even with my scholarship covering tuition, I still needed money for housing, food, books, fees, and all the other expenses that come with existing in one of the most expensive cities in America. Cambridge, Massachusetts, wasn't exactly known for its affordable trailer parks. Room and board would run me about $16,000 a year. Books and supplies, another $2,000. Personal expenses, transportation, health insurance, and all the nickel-and-dime crap that sneaks up on you, easily $4,000 more. So I was looking at roughly $22,000 per year, $90,000 over 4 years, and I had exactly $212 left after my bus ticket. The math wasn't just bad. It was laughable. But here's the thing about growing up dirt poor in a trailer park with a father who wouldn't spring for new shoes when yours had holes in the soles. You learn to get creative. You learn that there's always a way to make money if you're willing to do what other people won't. And honey, I was willing to do just about anything short of selling my organs on the black market. Though I won't lie, the thought crossed my mind. Somewhere around Delaware, I started making a list in a spiral notebook. Ways to make money. The list got increasingly unhinged as the miles ticked by. Waitressing. Boring but reliable. Donating plasma. Painful but quick cash. Selling hair. Mine was long and thick, might be worth something. Medical trials. How bad could experimental drugs be? Crime scene cleanup. I had a strong stomach and no squeamishness. Underwater welding. Dangerous but paid a fortune. I'd need certification. Offshore crabbing in Alaska. I'd seen deadliest catch. I could handle it. I crossed out the last one when I remembered I got seasick on a fishing trip when I was 12. But the rest stayed on the list. Every single one would eventually make its way into my resume of desperation. The bus pulled into South Station in Boston at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. I stepped off into air that felt completely alien. The city smelled like salt water and diesel and a million people living on top of each other. Nothing like the dust and pine needles and stagnation of Alabama. It smelled like possibility. It also smelled like I was about to get my ass kicked by reality. I had exactly $198 to my name. I'd spent $14 on a gas station sandwich and a bag of chips somewhere in Pennsylvania. Orientation started in 6 days. I had nowhere to sleep, no job, and no plan beyond the raw, burning conviction that I would rather die than crawl back to Buck Cole. I found a 24-hour diner near the station and bought a cup of coffee for $1.50. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with nicotine-stained fingers and a name tag that said Doreen, took pity on me. "You look like you've been rode hard and put away wet, honey. You running from something?" "Running toward something, actually. I'm starting at MIT next week." Doreen let out a bark of laughter. "MIT? You? A little Alabama thing with a duffel bag and duct tape shoes?" I looked down at my sneakers. She wasn't wrong. There was duct tape involved. Yeah, well, appearances can be deceiving. I'll say. She refilled my coffee without asking. You got a place to stay? Working on it. She stared at me for a long moment, then pulled a folded newspaper from under the counter and flipped to the classifieds. My sister runs a boarding house in Somerville. It's a shithole, but it's cheap. $300 a month, utilities included. Tell her Doreen sent you and she might knock off $50 for the first month. $300. I had $197 left after the coffee. I needed to make $103 in the next 24 hours just to secure a roof over my head, and then I'd need food money on top of that. Thank you, Doreen. Seriously. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the place. She scribbled an address on a napkin. Now finish your coffee and get moving. This city eats little girls like you for breakfast. I finished my coffee. Then I did the first truly insane thing of my new life in Boston. I walked into every business within a 5-block radius of the bus station and asked for work. Not applications. Work. Right now. Today. Cash under the table. By 7 a.m., I'd been rejected by 2 diners, a laundromat, a convenience store, and a pawn shop. At 7:15, I walked into a place called Big Al's Auto Body and found a 300-pound man in grease-stained overalls cursing at a transmission. What do you want? I need to make $100 by tonight. I'll do anything. Sweep floors, scrub toilets, organize your tools, whatever you got. Big Al looked me up and down. You know anything about cars? I know how to work. I know how to learn. And I know I'm cheaper than whoever you're paying now. He laughed, a deep belly laugh that shook his whole frame. I like your hustle, kid. Alright, you see that pile of scrap metal in the corner? That's 2 months of neglected recycling. Sort it. Separate the aluminum from the steel from the copper. You do a good job, I'll give you $50 and a reference. You do a great job, I'll make it 100. I worked for 14 hours straight. My hands were bleeding by hour 3, even through the work gloves Al tossed me. My back screamed by hour 6. By hour 10, I couldn't feel my arms anymore. But I sorted every last piece of metal in that corner, organized it by type and grade, and even swept the entire shop floor while I was at it. At 9 p.m., Big Al walked over and surveyed my work. He was quiet for a long moment. Where'd you learn to work like this? I grew up watching my old man break his body on construction sites. He was a mean bastard, but he knew how to work. I figure I inherited the work ethic without the meanness. Maybe I got double the work ethic to make up for his lack. Al nodded slowly. Here's 120. The extra 20 is for the bleeding. Go buy yourself some bandages and a decent meal. He pulled out a business card. And when you're not studying at that fancy school of yours, you come back here. I always got work for someone who knows how to hustle. I almost cried. Almost. I didn't let myself. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Crying was for people with safety nets, and mine had been burned to ash in an Alabama backyard. Instead, I pocketed the money, thanked Big Al, and walked to the address on Doreen's napkin with my spine straight and my chin high. The boarding house in Somerville was every bit the shithole Doreen had promised. Peeling paint, a shared bathroom that hadn't been cleaned since the first Bush administration, and a room the size of a walk-in closet with a single window that faced a brick wall. The mattress sagged in the middle, the radiator clanked like a dying man, and there was a mysterious stain on the ceiling that I chose not to investigate. It was perfect. It was mine. And it cost me $250 for the first month because Doreen's sister, a chain-smoking woman named Rita, took one look at my bleeding hands and knocked $50 off without me even asking. I had $53 left to my name. MIT orientation was in 5 days. That night, I lay on the sagging mattress, stared at the mysterious ceiling stain, and laughed until tears ran down my face. I was in Boston. I was enrolled at MIT. I had a roof over my head, barely. And I'd already proven I could hustle my way out of immediate disaster. But the real battle hadn't even started yet. The first week at MIT was like being dropped into a foreign country where everyone spoke a language I barely understood. And I don't mean the academics, though those were terrifying enough. I mean the culture. The money. The casual way my classmates talked about their summer internships at NASA and their parents who were tenured professors and their high school robotics competitions that had been sponsored by actual Fortune 500 companies. I showed up to orientation in jeans that were too short because I'd grown another inch over the summer and hadn't noticed, a t-shirt with a hole in the armpit, and the one pair of shoes I owned. Everyone else was in designer casual wear that probably cost more than my father made in a month. I didn't know what a boat shoe was until I saw 40 pairs of them in one lecture hall. I didn't know what Casual Friday meant when every day of my life had been casual out of necessity. The first person who tried to befriend me was a girl named Madison Whitakerchin. Double-barreled last name, parents were both cardiologists at Mass General, summer home on Nantucket. She was perfectly nice, perfectly polished, and perfectly incapable of understanding my life. When I told her I'd paid for my first month's rent by sorting scrap metal until my hands bled, she looked at me like I'd told her I'd wrestled a bear. Wait, like, actual metal? With your hands? Why didn't you just ask your parents for help? Not an option. But why? I considered telling her the truth. That my father had burned my scholarship letter with a blowtorch. That I'd walked 4 miles to the bus station with nothing but a duffel bag and a rage that could power a small city. That I was operating on pure spite and the desperate hope that my mother was watching from somewhere and feeling proud. Instead, I said, long story. I'll tell you sometime when we're drunk. Madison looked slightly horrified at the prospect of getting drunk, and I filed her away under nice but useless. She'd be a good study partner. She'd never be a real friend. Real friends understood struggle. Real friends had scars. Madison's most traumatic life experience was probably when her family's private jet got delayed. But there were others like me. It took a few days to find them, but they existed. Maria Vasquez from East LA, whose single mother cleaned houses for a living. Jamal Thompson from Detroit, who'd lost 2 cousins to gun violence and was determined to become an engineer so he could build something instead of destroying. Olga Petrov, a Russian immigrant whose parents had fled the Soviet Union with nothing and now ran a dry cleaning business in Brighton Beach. We found each other in the financial aid office, all of us clutching our paperwork like lifelines, all of us with the same haunted look of people who knew exactly how much everything cost and exactly how little we had. Study group? Maria said, holding up her course catalog. Because I'm already lost and classes haven't even started. Only if we meet somewhere with free coffee, I said. Library has free coffee on Wednesdays, Jamal offered. My apartment has free coffee always, Olga said. Is terrible coffee. Made from cheapest beans available. But is free. And just like that, I had a crew. The scholarship kids. The ones who didn't belong in either world anymore, too educated for the places we came from and too poor for the places we were going. Classes started, and the academic onslaught was immediate and brutal. Thermodynamics. Fluid mechanics. Multivariable calculus. Physics that made my brain feel like it was being wrung out like a dish rag. I'd been the smartest kid in my high school by a mile. At MIT, I was aggressively average. Maybe below average. The first time I got a C on a problem set, I locked myself in the communal bathroom and hyperventilated for 10 minutes. But I didn't quit. I couldn't quit. Quitting meant going back to Alabama, and going back to Alabama meant facing Buck Cole's smug face saying, "I told you so." That was simply not an option. I would rather die in a Boston gutter than give that man the satisfaction. So I studied. God, did I study? I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. I was in the library from opening to close, surviving on vending machine crackers and the free coffee Olga provided. When my classmates went to parties on the weekends, I went to office hours. When they joined clubs and built connections and networked, I was reviewing problem sets and memorizing equations. And when I wasn't studying, I was working. Big AL's auto body became my regular weekend gig. $20 an hour under the table, more if I did something particularly unpleasant. I learned to change oil, rotate tires, and eventually diagnose engine problems. Al said I had the knack. I said I had desperation and a good memory. But 20 hours a week at the auto shop wasn't going to cover $22,000 a year. I needed more income. A lot more. And that's when I started working my way through the list I'd made on the Greyhound bus. My first plasma donation paid $40 and left me lightheaded for the rest of the day. I went back twice a week for 3 months until the nurse told me my veins were starting to scar and I needed to take a break. I moved on to medical trials. The first one was testing a new allergy medication. They paid me $1,500 to take a pill every day for 6 weeks and report any side effects. I spent the entire 6 weeks itching like I'd rolled in poison ivy, but $1,500 bought my textbooks for the semester with enough left over for food. The second medical trial was more intense. They were testing an experimental sleep aid, and I had to spend 4 nights in a sleep lab with electrodes glued to my scalp while they monitored my brain activity. The drug gave me vivid nightmares about my father chasing me through an endless cornfield with his blowtorch. I woke up screaming twice. But they paid me $3,000, and $3,000 was 3 months of rent. By the end of my first semester, I'd pieced together an income stream that was ugly but functional. Auto shop on weekends. Plasma when my veins could handle it. Medical trials during breaks. And a new addition to the roster, cleaning the boarding house bathrooms for a rent reduction. Rita knocked $100 off my monthly payment if I scrubbed the toilets and showers every Saturday morning. It was disgusting work, but disgusting work paid. I passed my first semester with a 3.4 GPA. Not stellar, but solid. Good enough to keep my scholarship. Good enough to prove I belonged. I called my grandmother to tell her, and she cried into the phone for 5 minutes straight. Your mama would be so proud, Reagan. So goddamn proud. You keep going, you hear me? You show that bastard father of yours what you're made of. Speaking of which, is he around? A pause. He's in the hospital. I felt a cold spike in my chest. What? Why? Work accident. Something fell on him at the construction site. Crushed a couple ribs. He's fine, or he will be. You know your daddy. Too mean to die. He's not my anything, I said flatly. But I'm glad he's not dead, I guess. I hung up feeling weirdly unsettled. Buck Cole in a hospital bed wasn't an image I could easily conjure. The man was built like a brick wall. Things didn't crush him. He crushed things. But I pushed the thought aside. I had my own survival to worry about. I didn't have the bandwidth to worry about his. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for almost 3 more years, was that the work accident wasn't an accident at all. My father had been pushing his body past its limits for months, working double shifts on a construction site despite increasingly severe chest pains. He'd ignored the warning signs until his heart literally started to fail. The crushed ribs happened because he collapsed on the job and a stack of drywall fell on him. But nobody told me that. My grandmother didn't know the full extent of it, and Buck Cole certainly wasn't going to call his estranged daughter to say, "Hey, I might be dying, no big deal." So I went back to my life in Boston, blissfully ignorant of the ticking time bomb in my father's chest. I had bigger problems. Like the fact that my second semester tuition bill was coming due, and I was still $5,000 short. That's when I discovered the wonderful world of high-interest student loans. But that's also when I discovered something far more profitable. Something that made me $5,000 in a single night. Underground poker. Here's the thing about growing up in a trailer park in Alabama. You learn cards. You learn cards because there's nothing else to do, and because old men in trailer parks love nothing more than taking money from each other over folding tables in dimly lit living rooms. I'd been playing poker since I was 7. By the time I was 14, I could read a bluff from across a smoky room. By 18, I was regularly cleaning out my father's drinking buddies for grocery money. So when Jamal mentioned that there was an underground poker game running in the basement of a Chinese restaurant in Quincy, I didn't hesitate. "You play?" he asked, skeptical. "I play." "How much is the buy-in?" $500. "But Reagan, these guys are serious. They're not messing around." "Neither am I." I took $500 from my medical trial money, bought a cheap blazer from Goodwill so I'd look less like a student and more like someone who belonged at a poker table, and I walked into that basement with my heart hammering but my face as blank as fresh paper. The players were exactly what I'd expected. Middle-aged men with expensive watches and cheap instincts. They saw a 22-year-old girl and assumed I was either lost or stupid. I let them assume. I played conservative for the first hour, folding on mediocre hands, letting them get comfortable. And then I started bleeding them dry. By midnight, I'd turned my $500 into $4,000. By 2 a.m., I was up to 7. The host, a massive Chinese man named Mr. Wu, was eyeing me with suspicion and something that might have been respect. "You played before," he said. It wasn't a question. "A few times." "A few times." He laughed. "You hustle." "I prefer to think of it as strategic entertainment." He laughed harder at that. "You come back next week. I want to see you play against my cousin. He thinks he's best player in Boston. Very arrogant. I want to see you humble him." I looked at the pile of chips in front of me. $7,000. More than enough to cover my tuition gap with some left over for emergencies. It wasn't sustainable. I couldn't count on winning every week. But it was a lifeline when I needed one. "I'll think about it," I said, and pocketed my winnings. I walked out of that basement with $7,000 in cash stuffed into my bra and the kind of adrenaline rush that makes you feel immortal. For the first time since arriving in Boston, I felt like I might actually make it. Not just survive, but win. I should have known the universe was about to punch me in the face. The punch came 3 weeks later, in the form of an eviction notice taped to my door. Rita's boarding house had been sold to a developer who was turning it into luxury condos. I had 30 days to vacate. The cheapest apartment I could find within commuting distance of MIT was $1,200 a month, more than double what I'd been paying. Suddenly my carefully balanced financial house of cards was collapsing. I handled it the way I handled everything. By working harder. I added a fourth income stream to my rotation, crime scene cleanup. I'd seen an ad on Craigslist that said strong stomach? Make $500 a day. I had a very strong stomach. The work was exactly as horrible as it sounded. Blood, bodily fluids, the aftermath of violence and tragedy. I spent my first shift scrubbing brain matter off a bathroom wall and didn't eat for 24 hours afterward. But $500 was $500. I kept showing up. Between the auto shop, the medical trials, the poker games, and the crime scene cleanup, I was working 60 hours a week on top of a full engineering course load. I slept 4 hours a night. I lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. My grade slipped to a 3.1. Maria started leaving protein bars on my desk with notes that said eat this or I will force feed you. But I paid my tuition. I paid my rent. I didn't ask anyone for help. And I didn't call Alabama. The semester ground on. I existed in a state of permanent exhaustion, running on caffeine and spite. I stopped going to poker games because I couldn't afford to lose. I donated plasma until the nurses banned me. I cleaned up things I will never describe because the memories make me want to shower for 3 days. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos and exhaustion and borderline insanity, something weird started happening. Money started showing up. The first time, it was an anonymous envelope in my campus mailbox. Inside, $500 in crisp $20 bills. No note. No explanation. Just cash. I assumed it was a mistake, or maybe some weird MIT scholarship I'd forgotten applying for. The second time, my landlord called to tell me my rent had been paid for the next 3 months. By who? He didn't know. Some guy who called, gave a credit card number, and hung up. The third time, I came home to find a bag of groceries on my doorstep. Not cheap groceries. Organic vegetables, fresh fruit, good bread. The kind of food I never bought because I couldn't afford it. There was a receipt in the bag. Paid in cash. No name. I asked everyone I knew. Maria, Jamal, Olga, Doreen at the diner, Big Al. Nobody admitted to anything. My grandmother swore she wasn't sending money, and I believed her because she was just as broke as I was. The mystery spooked me. I was a girl who'd learned that nothing in life was free, that every gift had strings attached. But I was also too exhausted and too desperate to look a gift horse in the mouth. I used the money. I ate the groceries. I paid the rent that had already been paid. But I started paying attention. Watching doorways. Checking shadows. The feeling of being watched became a constant companion. Then came the night everything changed. I was walking home from the auto shop at 11 p.m., my hands still greasy despite 3 rounds of scrubbing, when I noticed a figure standing under the broken streetlight outside my apartment building. Big guy. Broad shoulders. Standing perfectly still in a way that made my lizard brain scream danger. I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the box cutter I'd started carrying after my first week of crime scene cleanup. Can I help you? The figure stepped forward into the dim light, and I saw his face. It wasn't Buck Cole. But it was someone who looked enough like him to make my stomach drop. Same build. Same hard features. He was younger, maybe 30, with a scar running from his eyebrow to his jaw and eyes that were flat and cold like a frozen lake. You Reagan Cole? His voice was gravel. Who's asking? Friend of your daddy's. Ice water in my veins. I don't have a daddy. That's funny. He talks about you all the time. The man took another step closer. Says you're real smart. Real stubborn. Says you ran off to some fancy school up north. What do you want? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Got something for you. Your daddy's been keeping tabs. Thought you should know what he's been up to. I don't want anything from him. You'll want this. He pressed the paper into my hand despite my resistance. Read it. Then do what you want. I'm just the messenger. He walked away before I could say anything else, disappearing into the shadows like he'd never been there. I stood under the broken streetlight, holding the folded paper, my heart racing. Every instinct told me to throw it away. Buck Cole had torched my future. Whatever game he was playing now, I didn't want to be part of it. But my fingers were already unfolding the paper. It was a medical document. St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. Patient name, William Buck Cole. Diagnosis, dilated cardiomyopathy. Stage 3. Recommended treatment, left ventricular assist device followed by eventual heart transplant. Attached to the document was a handwritten note, scrawled in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. Reagan, baby. Your daddy's dying. He's been dying for 2 years. He didn't want you to know. He said he didn't want to burden you after everything he did. But I can't keep his secrets anymore. The reason he burned your letter, the reason he pushed you away, it wasn't because he didn't believe in you. It was because he knew he couldn't afford to help you and he couldn't bear to watch you struggle. So he made you hate him instead. He thought that would be easier for you. He's an idiot. But he's a dying idiot. And he's been sending you money every month for 2 years, skimming it off his own medical bills. I just thought you should know. The paper trembled in my hands. I read it again. Then again. Then I sat down on the front steps of my apartment building and stared at the cracked concrete for a very long time. My father was dying. He'd been dying the whole time. And instead of telling me, instead of asking for help, instead of doing literally anything that made sense, he'd burned my scholarship letter to make me hate him. He'd pushed me away so I wouldn't have to watch him fade. He'd been paying my rent and sending me grocery money with money he was supposed to use to keep himself alive. I thought of every curse I'd hurled at his memory. Every time I'd told myself I was better off without him. Every night I'd spent in that sagging mattress bed, fueling myself on rage and the desperate need to prove him wrong. And now I found out he'd been proving me right all along. He did believe in me. He'd always believed in me. He just hadn't wanted to be my anchor. What the hell do I do with this? I whispered to the empty street. The empty street didn't answer. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my mother's voice, soft and steady, reminding me of the one thing she'd always told me. Family is messy, baby. But it's still family. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it into my pocket, and went inside. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my sagging mattress, staring at the mysterious ceiling stain, and tried to figure out how to feel. Rage was easy. Rage had been my fuel for 2 years. But underneath the rage was something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like grief. The next morning, I called my grandmother. "Tell me everything." And she did. The whole ugly, heartbreaking, infuriating story. How Buck Cole had been diagnosed 6 months before my acceptance letter arrived. How the doctors had told him he needed a heart transplant that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars even with insurance. How he'd looked at his prognosis and decided his daughter's future was worth more than his own life. How he'd burned my letter because he knew if he let me stay, he'd eventually become a burden, and he refused to do that to me. "He's an idiot," my grandmother said, her voice cracking. "The stubbornest, stupidest man God ever put on this earth. But he loves you, Reagan. He's always loved you. He just never learned how to say it. What's his prognosis now?" A long pause. "Not good, baby. His heart's failing faster than the doctors expected. They say he needs a transplant within the next year, maybe 18 months at most. But the waiting list is long, and he's not exactly a priority candidate given his age and his other health problems. He's been trying to hide how bad it is, but I see him. He can barely walk up a flight of stairs anymore." I closed my eyes. Took a breath. Then I made a decision that surprised even me. "Don't tell him I know. Not yet. I need to figure some things out." "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know yet. But I'll figure it out. I always do." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. 2 years of rage had just been completely reframed. The man I'd hated with every fiber of my being was a dying father who'd sacrificed himself for my future. The betrayal I'd nursed like a wound was actually a gift, wrapped in barbed wire and set on fire, but a gift nonetheless. Part of me wanted to get on the next bus to Alabama and scream at him until my voice gave out. Another part wanted to never speak to him again, to let him die with his secrets intact and his guilt unabsolved. And a third part, the part that sounded like my mother, wanted to figure out how to save him. I didn't know which part would win. But I knew one thing for certain. I was going to graduate from MIT. I was going to become an aerospace engineer. And somehow, some way, I was going to get my idiot father a new heart. Even if I had to steal one. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that phone call with my grandmother. Not because I couldn't, but because my brain had kicked into a gear I didn't know existed. It was the same gear that had gotten me through sorting scrap metal with bleeding hands. The same gear that had kept me standing at poker tables when I was down to my last chip. The gear that said, "There's a problem. Solve it." Here's what I knew. My father, Buck Cole, the man who'd burned my scholarship letter with a blowtorch, was dying of a failing heart. He needed a transplant that would cost somewhere north of $500,000. He had no savings. He had crap insurance through the construction company. And he'd spent the last 2 years secretly funneling money to me instead of paying for his own medical care. The math was a nightmare. A heart transplant in the United States, with all the associated costs, surgery, hospital stay, anti-rejection drugs for life, could easily hit $1 million. Even with insurance covering a chunk, the out-of-pocket would be devastating. My father was on a waiting list, but the list was long and he was 57 years old with a body that had been abused by 30 years of construction work and a recent history of ignoring doctors' orders. He wasn't at the top of anyone's priority list. I sat in my crappy apartment, surrounded by thermodynamics textbooks and crime scene cleanup gloves, and I made another list. This time, it wasn't ways to make money for tuition. This time, it was ways to save a dying man who'd spent his whole life pushing me away. Option 1, win the lottery. Probability, statistically indistinguishable from 0. Option 2, rob a bank. Probability of success, higher than the lottery, but the career implications were problematic. Option 3, graduate from MIT, get a high-paying engineering job, and pay for the transplant myself. Timeline, too slow. My father had maybe 18 months. Option 4, find a way to jump the transplant list. Unethical. Probably illegal. But I wasn't ruling anything out. Option 5, raise the money through sheer force of will and the same insane hustling that had paid for my degree. I circled option 5. It was the only one that didn't involve prison time or divine intervention. But I was going to need more than auto shop work and poker winnings. I was going to need a miracle. The first thing I did was call Mr. Wu, the man who ran the underground poker game in Quincy. He picked up on the third ring. You want to play again? His voice was amused. My cousin is still waiting for his rematch. I want more than a game. I want information. Where do the real high rollers play? A long pause. The real high rollers? Those games are not for students. Buy-ins start at 10,000. Sometimes 50. You have that kind of money? Not yet. But I will. How? I'm good at what I do. Another pause. Then he laughed, low and rumbling. You have guts, I give you that. There's a game in Providence. Private. Invitation only. The players are businessmen, politicians, people with more money than sense. The buy-in is 25,000. I can get you an invitation, but it will cost you 10% of your winnings. 5%. 8. Done. I hung up and stared at my bank account. I had $4,200 to my name. I needed $25,000 in 2 weeks. The old Reagan would have balked at the impossibility of it. The new Reagan, the one who knew her father was dying in an Alabama trailer while she played engineer in Boston, started calculating. I sold everything I owned that wasn't essential to survival. My laptop, which I'd already replaced once after the duct-taped one finally died, went for $600. My grandmother's old jewelry, the few pieces she'd given me before I left, brought another $2,000 from a pawn shop in Dorchester. I didn't cry when I handed over her pearl earrings. I didn't have time for crying. I had a father to save, even if he didn't want to be saved. The rest of the money came from the darkest corners of my skill set. I took every crime scene cleanup shift I could get, including a triple homicide that took 3 days to process. I donated plasma until my arms looked like a heroin addict's. I played small stakes poker every night for a week, grinding out $100 wins against drunk college kids who didn't know when to fold. And when I was still 5,000 short, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I called Bobby Denton. Not for money. Bobby didn't have money. But Bobby's uncle, Lester Denton, ran a trucking company that needed someone to drive a hazardous waste shipment from Boston to Buffalo and back. The pay was $8,000 for a week's work. The catch was that the cargo was technically illegal to transport without a special license, which I didn't have. Lester didn't care. He just needed someone willing to take the risk. I heard you were desperate, Bobby said on the phone, his voice still carrying that annoying nasal twang. Didn't believe it at first. You always were too proud for your own good. I'm not desperate. I'm motivated. There's a difference. Whatever you say, Reagan. You want the job or not? I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being wanted to tell Bobby Denton to go roll in pig slop where he belonged. But I thought about my father's failing heart. I thought about the medical document folded in my pocket. I thought about my mother, who'd told me to reach for the stars, and about Buck Cole, who'd burned my scholarship because he thought his daughter's stars were worth more than his own life. I'll take it. The Hazardous waste run was the most terrifying week of my life. I drove a semi-truck full of chemical waste through 3 states, constantly looking over my shoulder for DOT inspectors, sleeping in the cab at rest stops, eating gas station hot dogs for every meal. The truck smelled like ammonia and death. The radio only picked up static and fire and brimstone preachers. I nearly got pulled over in Pennsylvania and had to talk my way out of it with a state trooper who looked at me like I was a meth head. But I made it. Buffalo and back. No arrest. No accident. $8,000 deposited into my bank account by Lester Denton, who looked genuinely impressed when I handed over the delivery confirmation. You got more grit than my nephew, that's for damn sure, he said. You ever need work again, you call me. I appreciate that, Mr. Denton. But I'm hoping this is my last criminal enterprise. He laughed like I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. With the hazardous waste money, I had exactly $25,000. Every penny I owned in the world, plus the proceeds from selling my grandmother's jewelry, my laptop, and my dignity. I was about to bet it all on a poker game in Providence against men who probably wiped their asses with $100 bills. I didn't sleep the night before the game. I sat in my apartment, running probability calculations in my head, reviewing every poker strategy I'd ever learned. At 4 a.m., I called my grandmother. How is he? The same. Worse, maybe. He won't admit it, but I can tell. He's getting weaker. Does he know I know? No. He still thinks you hate him. He talks about you sometimes, when he's half asleep. Says your name. Says he's sorry. It breaks my heart, Reagan. I squeezed my eyes shut. I'm working on something. Don't tell him anything. Just keep him alive for a few more months. Can you do that? I've been keeping him alive for 57 years. I think I can manage a few more months. The poker game was held in the basement of a Providence restaurant that didn't technically exist. No sign outside. No listing on Google Maps. You had to know someone who knew someone, and Mr. Wu had cashed in a favor to get me through the door. The basement was paneled in dark wood with a full bar and a single table under a green-shaded light. 6 players. All men. All over 50. All wearing watches that cost more than my entire MIT education. I walked in wearing my Goodwill blazer and the one pair of heels I owned, which I'd bought for $8 at a consignment shop. The men looked at me like I was a stray cat that had wandered into a dog show. Mr. Wu, this is your guest? One of them, a silver-haired man with a Rolex and a thick Boston accent, looked at me with undisguised contempt. She's a child. She's a card player, Mr. Wu said calmly. And her money is as green as yours, Senator. Senator. Fantastic. I was about to fleece a politician. The game was Texas Hold'em, no limit. The buy-in was $25,000. I pushed my entire stack of chips into the center of the table and tried not to think about the fact that I'd just bet my father's life savings on my ability to read strangers. The first hour was brutal. I folded on 12 hands in a row, watching the men trade hundreds of thousands of dollars in chips like they were passing the salt. The senator was aggressive, betting big and bullying the table. A quiet man in a gray suit, who everyone called the accountant, played with cold, mechanical precision. The other 3 players were somewhere in between, decent but not spectacular. I waited. Patience was the one thing poverty had taught me. Then I got my opening. Pocket aces. The best starting hand in poker. I kept my face absolutely blank, The same blank I'd perfected in 100 trailer park games while my father's drunk friends tried to intimidate me. The senator raised. The accountant called. I re-raised, pushing a third of my chips into the pot. The senator's eyes flickered with surprise. He studied me for a long moment, trying to read a girl who'd been reading men since she was 7 years old. He called. The flop came. King, 10, 4. I had a pair of aces. The senator bet big. I raised again. He called. The turn was a queen. Now there was a possible straight on the board. The senator checked. I went all in. The silence in the room was absolute. The senator stared at me, his jaw working. You're bluffing. If you believe that, call. He called. I flipped over my aces. He flipped over a pair of kings. His hand was good. Mine was better. The pot was worth $80,000. Just like that, I'd tripled my money. The game continued until 4 in the morning. When I finally cashed out, I had $112,000 in chips. The senator had lost almost 200 grand and was drinking scotch like it was water. The accountant, who'd played conservatively all night, had broken even. The other 3 players had all lost varying amounts. Mr. Wu walked me to my car, which was actually a borrowed Honda Civic from Maria, because I didn't own a car. Your cut? I asked. He shook his head. No cut tonight. I made enough betting on you from the sidelines. Half the people in that room bet against you. I bet for you. Made $60,000. You are my new favorite person, Reagan Cole. You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Wu. 112,000. That's a lot of money for a student. What are you going to do with it? Save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He nodded slowly. I had a father like that. Stubborn. Silent. Died before I could forgive him. Don't make my mistake. I didn't plan to. I drove back to Boston in the early morning darkness, $112,000 in a duffel bag on the passenger seat, and a plan forming in my exhausted mind. It wasn't enough. Not nearly. A heart transplant could cost 10 times that. But it was a start. It was proof that I could do this. The next 6 months were a blur of studying, hustling, and secret scheming. I went back to the Providence game twice more, winning another $60,000. I took every hazardous waste run Lester Denton offered, adding another $24,000 to the fund. I worked the auto shop, the crime scene cleanup, the medical trials. I stopped eating anything that wasn't ramen or free. I stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely essential. By the middle of my junior year, I had $220,000 in a separate bank account, registered under my mother's maiden name so my father couldn't trace it. It still wasn't enough. But it was getting closer. And through it all, I kept my grades up. A 3.6 GPA. A summer internship at a private space company that paid $20,000 and gave me real engineering experience. My professors started noticing me, not as the scrappy scholarship kid who was always falling asleep in class, but as the brilliant, driven young woman who was going places. Professor Chen, my thermodynamics teacher and the closest thing I had to a mentor at MIT, pulled me aside after class one day. Reagan, I'm going to be blunt with you. You look terrible. Thank you, Professor. I've been going for the walking corpse aesthetic. I'm serious. You've lost weight. You have dark circles. You're working yourself to death. I know about the jobs. The poker games. The things you do to make money. I don't know why you need so much of it, but whatever it is, it's killing you. I opened my mouth to deny it, but she held up a hand. I'm not going to ask. It's not my business. But I have something for you. She handed me a folder. There's a full-ride graduate fellowship. Covers tuition, housing, a living stipend. It's competitive, but you're exactly the kind of student they want. Someone who's overcome adversity. Someone who's hungry. I opened the folder. The fellowship was for a combined master's and PhD program in aerospace engineering. 5 years of funding. No more hustling. No more poker games. No more hazardous waste runs. Professor Chen, I don't know what to say. Say you'll apply. And say you'll start eating more than ramen noodles. I can smell the sodium from here. I applied. I got it. The fellowship covered everything. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. But I didn't stop hustling. I couldn't. I had $250,000 to raise, and a father who was running out of time. My grandmother called every week with updates. Buck was stable, she said, but not improving. The transplant list was moving slowly. His color was bad. He couldn't work anymore. He spent most days in a recliner, watching old war movies and pretending he wasn't in pain. He asks about you, she said. Never directly. He'll say things like, you think she's eating enough up there? Or you think that school is treating her right? He still thinks you don't know about his heart. Let him think that. I'm not ready to talk to him yet. When will you be ready? When I can tell him I've saved his life. The months rolled on. My senior year was a whirlwind of advanced engineering courses, thesis research, and continuing my secret fundraising. I won another $80,000 at the Providence game. The senator, by now, actively hated me, but he kept playing because his ego wouldn't let him quit. The accountant had become something like a friend, or at least the poker equivalent of one. He never showed emotion, but he always nodded at me when I sat down. By the time graduation rolled around, I had done the impossible. I had $340,000 in my secret account. It was enough to cover the transplant surgery and the first year of anti-rejection drugs. It was enough to give my father a fighting chance. I hadn't spoken to him in 4 years. Not since the day he burned my scholarship letter. But I was about to see him again. The graduation ceremony was held in Killian Court, under a perfect June sky. I put on my cap and gown with hands that were surprisingly steady. For years of blood, sweat, and insanity, and I was walking out of MIT with a degree in aerospace engineering and a job offer from a major space company. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt like a fraud. I hadn't spoken to my father. I'd sent him money he didn't know about. I'd saved his life from a distance, like some kind of emotionally stunted superhero. And now I was going to walk across a stage and accept my diploma while he was 800 miles away, dying in a recliner. Or so I thought. Because as I sat in the sea of graduates, waiting for my name to be called, I heard a commotion at the back of the courtyard. A sound of metal scraping and someone shouting. I turned around, along with everyone else in my row, and I saw something that made my jaw drop. A cherry picker truck, the kind used for repairing power lines, was rolling slowly down the aisle between the folding chairs. It was painted bright orange and had Hernandez Tree Service on the side. Riding in the elevated bucket at the top, clutching a bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd been run over by a lawnmower, was my father. Buck Cole. In a cherry picker. At my MIT graduation. He was even thinner than I'd imagined. His face was gaunt, his skin gray, his hands trembling visibly on the safety rail. But his eyes, those hard, stubborn eyes I'd inherited, were fixed on me with an intensity that made my chest ache. The bucket lowered unsteadily to the ground. 2 security guards were rushing toward the truck, but my father stepped out of the bucket before they could reach him, waving them off with a snarl. I paid the driver $200 to get me here. I ain't leaving until I talk to my daughter. The entire courtyard had gone silent. 5,000 graduates and their families, all staring at the dying man in the stained work shirt who'd just crashed an MIT graduation in a stolen cherry picker. Professor Chen, who was on stage, caught my eye and gave me the tiniest nod. She knew. She'd always known. My father started walking toward me, limping slightly, the mangled bouquet clutched in his fist. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. I stood up from my chair, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. He stopped 3 feet away from me. Up close, he looked even worse. His lips were slightly blue. His breathing was labored. But he was here. Against all odds, against all medical advice, against everything that made sense, he was here. "I know I ain't got the right to be here," he said, his voice raspier than I remembered. "I know I did you wrong. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I had to see you graduate, Reagan. I had to." He held out the bouquet. It was even worse than the one I'd imagined all those years ago. The flowers were mostly dandelions and wild clover, clearly picked from the side of the road somewhere. They were wilted and crushed, their stems bent at sad angles. There was a bee still clinging to one of the clovers, apparently as stunned as the rest of us. "These are ugly as sin," he admitted. "Picked 'em on the side of the highway about 50 miles back. I was gonna buy real flowers, but I spent all my money bribing the cherry picker guy." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Reagan. For everything. For burning your letter. For pushing you away. For being too damn stupid to tell you I loved you when it mattered." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The crowd was still silent. 5,000 people holding their breath. "I know I'm dying," he said quietly. "I know I ain't got much time left. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see my little girl get her diploma. That's all. Just wanted to see you win." He held out the bouquet one more time, his hand trembling. And I, Reagan Cole, the girl who'd sorted scrap metal until her hands bled, who'd cleaned crime scenes and driven hazardous waste and played poker against senators, who'd survived 4 years at MIT on pure spite and ramen noodles, finally broke. I grabbed the bouquet, bee and all, and I pulled my father into a hug so tight I could feel every rib in his failing body. He stiffened for a moment, then his arms came around me, and he held on like I was the only thing keeping him upright. "You idiot," I sobbed into his shoulder. "You absolute, complete, monumental idiot." "I know," he whispered. "I know. I've been saving money for your heart transplant for 2 years, you stupid old man. $340,000. You're not dying. You're not allowed to die." He pulled back, his eyes wide with shock. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. Grandma told me." "Did you really think she could keep a secret?" "But the money, the poker games, the crime scene stuff. I thought you were just trying to pay for school." "School was paid for, you moron. I've been saving your life." My father stared at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time in my entire life, I saw Buck Cole cry. It wasn't pretty. It was ugly and raw, the kind of crying a man does when he's held everything in for 57 years and the dam finally breaks. Tears carved tracks through the dust on his cheeks. His shoulders shook. He made sounds like a wounded animal. "I don't deserve you," he choked out. "I never deserved you." "That's probably true," I said, wiping my own eyes. "But you're stuck with me anyway." Somewhere behind us, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Soon the entire courtyard was on its feet, 5,000 people applauding the dying man in the stained work shirt who'd crashed their graduation in a stolen cherry picker. The security guards, who'd been hovering uncertainly, backed off. The driver of the cherry picker, a young guy with a Red Sox cap and a confused expression, gave us a thumbs up. My father looked around at the applauding crowd, his face a mask of bewilderment. "Are they clapping for me?" "They're clapping because this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened at an MIT graduation." I tucked the ugly bouquet under my arm. "Come on, Dad. Let's go find you a seat. You're about to watch your daughter get her diploma." "But I ain't got a ticket." "I think they'll make an exception." I led him to the front row, where a bemused usher found him a folding chair. He sat down heavily, his breathing labored but his eyes brighter than I'd seen them in years. I handed him the bouquet to hold, partly because it was his and partly because I needed both hands to straighten my cap. "Don't let the bee sting you," I said. "I've been stung by worse." My name was called 10 minutes later. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, and accepted my diploma in aerospace engineering. When I looked out at the crowd, I saw my father standing up, ignoring the protests of the people behind him, holding that ridiculous bouquet over his head like a victory flag. I didn't just walk across that stage. I floated. After the ceremony, I found him sitting on a bench near the Charles River, looking out at the water. The cherry picker had been towed away, but the driver had left his card. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Diminished. But there was a peace in his expression I'd never seen before. "Nice river," he said. "It's the Charles." "I know. I read about it." I sat down next to him. "You read about the Charles River?" "I read about a lot of things since you left. Tried to understand what was so special about this place. Why you wanted to come here so bad." He paused. "Now I get it." We sat in silence for a while. Then he spoke again. $340,000? Give or take. "How?" "I told you. Poker. Hazardous waste. Crime scene cleanup. I sold grandma's jewelry. I donated so much plasma I'm probably half saline solution at this point." He shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't have done that. I ain't worth that much. Let me be the judge of what you're worth. I burned your scholarship letter. I remember. I told you to marry Bobby Denton. That was unforgivable, actually. I was too much of a coward to tell you I was dying. I pushed you away because I thought it would be easier for you to hate me than to watch me fade. It wasn't. I know that now." He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed and wet. "I'm sorry, Reagan. For all of it. Every stupid word. Every failure. I let you down in every way a father can let down a daughter." I took a long breath. The Charles glittered in the June sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, a graduation party was setting off fireworks. "Maybe. But you also taught me how to work. You taught me how to fight. You taught me that nothing in this life is free, and that if I wanted something bad enough, I'd have to claw it out of the dirt with my bare hands." I turned to face him. "You broke me, Dad. But you also made me. I'm the woman I am today because of you, not in spite of you. And I'm pretty damn proud of who I am." He started crying again. This time, I didn't try to stop him. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we get you that heart transplant. I've already been in touch with a cardiologist at Mass General. One of the best in the country. She's reviewed your file. She thinks you're a candidate for a transplant, but we have to move fast. Your condition is worse than the doctors in Alabama realized." Mass General. That's gotta be expensive. I have $340,000. It's enough. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he did something I'd never seen him do before. He smiled. A real smile, not the bitter smirk he used to wear. This one reached his eyes. "You're the stubbornest woman I ever met," he said. "You get that from me." "I know. I love you, Reagan. I should have said it 1,000 times. I'm saying it now." I leaned my head against his shoulder. His body was bony and frail, nothing like the giant who'd loomed over my childhood. But his arm, when it came around me, felt exactly the same. "I love you too, you old bastard. Now let's go get you a new heart." The fight wasn't over. He still needed the transplant. There were still a million things that could go wrong. But for the first time in 4 years, I wasn't fighting alone. And for the first time in his entire life, neither was he. As we sat there by the river, the world's ugliest bouquet wilting on the bench between us, I realized something. I'd spent 4 years trying to prove my father wrong. And in the end, he'd proven me right. He'd always believed in me. He just didn't know how to say it until it was almost too late. Almost. But not quite. I wasn't going to let it be too late. Not for him. Not for us. I'd clawed my way through MIT, through poker games and hazardous waste and crime scene cleanup, through every obstacle the universe had thrown at me. I could claw my way through one more. The biggest one. The one that mattered most. Hey, Dad. Yeah? Thanks for the flowers. They're hideous. He laughed, a dry rusty sound that turned into a cough. I picked them myself. I could tell. I picked up the bouquet, the dandelions and clover already drooping in the summer heat, and I tucked it carefully into my graduation robe. I'd keep those flowers forever. Frame them, maybe. They were the most beautiful ugly things I'd ever seen. Here's the thing about the American healthcare system. It doesn't care that you just reconciled with your dying father at your MIT graduation. It doesn't care that you have $340,000 in a secret bank account. It doesn't care that you're an aerospace engineer with a job offer and a bright future. It cares about one thing: paperwork. Endless, soul-crushing, bureaucratic paperwork. I spent the week after graduation on the phone with Mass General Hospital, trying to get my father onto their transplant list. The cardiologist I'd contacted, Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, was brilliant and compassionate and exactly the kind of doctor you want handling your father's failing heart. But even she couldn't wave a magic wand and make the system move faster. Your father's case is complex, she told me during our first in-person meeting. We were sitting in her office, surrounded by diagrams of the human heart and framed medical degrees from institutions I couldn't pronounce. My father was in the waiting room, probably scowling at the magazines. He has dilated cardiomyopathy, which means his heart muscle is weakened and enlarged. It's not pumping blood efficiently. He also has significant blockage in 2 arteries, which complicates things. Ideally, we'd do a combined procedure, bypass surgery followed by eventual transplant, but his body might not handle that. What's the timeline? If we don't act soon? 6 months. Maybe less. I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. After everything, after 4 years of hustling and scraping and clawing my way to $340,000, I might still lose him because of a calendar. Then let's act now. I have the money. Dr. Okonkwo looked at me with something like pity. The money is only part of it, Ms. Cole. We need a heart. The waiting list is long, and your father's blood type is O-negative, which means he can only receive from another O-negative donor. That narrows the pool considerably. We also need to get him stable enough for surgery. Right now, his body is too weak. He needs weeks, possibly months, of pre-treatment before he'd survive the operation. Weeks. Months. Time I didn't have. What if we found a donor ourselves? She raised an eyebrow. That's not really how the system works. I didn't ask how the system works. I asked if it's possible. A long pause. There are protocols for directed donation. A living donor can designate a recipient. But for a heart, we're talking about deceased donors, and the matching process is handled by UNOS, the United Network for Organ Sharing. It's a national system. You can't just find a heart and claim it. But people jump the list all the time. Rich people. Connected people. Dr. Okonkwo's expression flickered. I wouldn't know anything about that. Of course not. I stood up. Get my father started on the pre-treatment. I'll handle the rest. The rest? The heart. I walked out of her office before she could ask more questions. My father was exactly where I'd left him, slouched in a waiting room chair, glaring at a copy of Good Housekeeping like it had personally insulted his mother. You done talking about me behind my back? Not even close. Come on. We're getting lunch. I took him to a diner near the hospital, the same kind of greasy spoon I'd eaten at 100 times during my MIT years. He ordered a bacon cheeseburger and I didn't tell him it was bad for his heart. At this point, the bacon was probably the least of his worries. "So what's the plan?" he asked, mouth half full. "They gonna cut me open?" "Eventually. First they need to get you strong enough. And we need to find a heart." Thought there was a list. There is. And you think you can just skip the list? I think I've been skipping lists my whole life. I leaned forward. "Dad, do you trust me?" He chewed slowly, his jaw working the same way it did when he was thinking hard about something. "I didn't trust you to go to MIT. Look how that turned out. This is different. This is your life. It's my life. Which means it's my decision." He put down the burger. "Reagan, I spent 4 years pushing you away because I didn't want to be a burden. Now you're telling me you've been killing yourself to save me. That's not what I wanted." "What did you want?" "I wanted you to be free. I wanted you to chase your stars without me dragging you down. That's all I ever wanted." "And what did you think would happen when you died? That I'd just shrug and move on? That I'd be grateful you sacrificed yourself for my tuition money?" "I didn't think about it like that." "Of course you didn't. Because you're a stubborn old man who thinks love means suffering in silence." I grabbed his hand across the table. "Well, guess what? I'm a stubborn young woman who thinks love means saving your sorry ass whether you like it or not. So you're going to eat your bacon cheeseburger, and you're going to do whatever Dr. Okonkwo tells you, and you're going to let me find you a heart. Understand?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed, that same dry rusty sound from graduation day. "You're definitely my daughter." "I know. Now finish your burger." The next month was organized chaos. I moved my father into my apartment, which meant I slept on the couch while he took the bed. The mysterious ceiling stain became a running joke between us. Every morning he'd point at it and say, "That thing's getting bigger," and I'd say, "So is your medical bill," and we'd both pretend we weren't terrified. Dr. Okonkwo started him on a cocktail of medications designed to strengthen his heart enough for surgery. Beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, diuretics. The pills made him tired and nauseous, but he never complained. Buck Cole complaining about physical discomfort would have been like the sun complaining about being hot. It simply wasn't in his nature. Meanwhile, I started working the problem from every angle I could think of. I called every contact I'd made during my 4 years of hustling. Big Al from the auto shop. Mr. Wu from the poker games. Even Lester Denton, the Hazardous waste kingpin. I told them all the same thing: I need a heart. Oh, negative. Anyone who helps me find one gets everything I have. You're asking me to find a black market organ? Lester said, his voice crackling through the phone. That's a whole different level of illegal, kid. Even for me. I'm not asking for black market. I'm asking for information. Connections. Someone who knows the system. A long pause. There might be a guy. Retired transplant coordinator. Got fired for fudging paperwork to help a senator's wife get a kidney ahead of schedule. He's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of grudges. Send me his number. The retired coordinator was a man named Gerald Hirsch. He lived in a retirement community in Florida and spent his days playing golf and nursing a 20-year grudge against the medical establishment that had fired him for doing exactly what powerful people had asked him to do. "You want to know how the transplant list really works?" he said during our first phone call. His voice was reedy but sharp. "It's not a list. It's a marketplace. The rich and connected get priority. Always have, always will. The public system is a fiction designed to keep the masses from rioting. So how do I get my father to the front of the line? You can't. Not legally. But there are gray areas. Directed donations. Living donors. If you can find someone willing to donate specifically to your father, that can bypass some of the wait time. It's still regulated, but the rules are more flexible for directed donations from family members or close friends. Family members? Blood relatives get priority consideration for living donation. But we're talking about a heart, sweetheart. Living people don't donate hearts. You need a deceased donor who matches, and you need them to have designated your father specifically. So I need to find a dying O-negative person who wants to give their heart to a stranger from Alabama. Essentially, yes. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge I'd been training for my whole life. I started a campaign. A real campaign, the kind of thing you see in movies about plucky underdogs fighting the system. I made flyers. I posted on every social media platform I could find. I contacted news stations, radio shows, podcasts. The story was too good to ignore. MIT graduate saves dying father after he burned her scholarship letter. Local news picked it up first. Then national. Then international. Alabama father who burned daughter's MIT acceptance gets second chance at life. Daughter raises $340,000 for father's heart transplant after years of estrangement. Reagan Cole, the aerospace engineer fighting to save the father who didn't believe in her. The headlines were everywhere. My face was everywhere. My father's face, gaunt and gray but still stubborn, was everywhere. Donations started pouring in from strangers who'd read our story and wanted to help. By the end of the second month, I had over $500,000 in the transplant fund. More than enough. But money wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was the heart. Weeks passed. Then months. My father's condition stabilized on the medication, but he was still fading. I could see it in the way he moved, slower every day, and the way his breathing got heavier after even short walks. Dr. Okonkwo was doing everything she could, but without a transplant, we were just buying time. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria one afternoon, staring at a cup of cold coffee and trying not to fall asleep, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Reagan Cole? The voice was young, female, and hesitant. Speaking. My name is Emily. Emily Chen. I saw your story on the news. About your father. I straightened up. Thank you for calling, Emily. I appreciate the support. That's not why I'm calling. A pause. My brother is dying. The words hit me like a freight train. I'm so sorry. He's 24. O-negative blood type. He was in a motorcycle accident 3 days ago. The doctors say he's brain dead. They're keeping him on life support, but there's no hope. He's an organ donor, but his organs will just go into the general pool. That's what they told us. But I saw your story, and I thought, maybe my brother's heart could help your dad. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up entirely. I talked to my parents, Emily continued, her voice trembling but determined. We all agreed. If your father is a match, we want to do a directed donation. My brother, his name was Kevin. He was an engineering student too. Electrical engineering, not aerospace, but still. He would have wanted this. He would have wanted his death to mean something. I finally found my voice. Emily, I don't know what to say. Say you'll take it. Say my brother's heart will keep beating somewhere. That's all I want. I'll take it. Of course I'll take it. But are you sure? Your parents are sure? This is huge. This is everything. My parents are sure. We talked about it all night. We want to do this. For Kevin. For your father. For everyone who deserves a second chance. I was crying now, ugly tears streaming down my face in the middle of the hospital cafeteria. Nobody even looked twice. Crying in hospitals was normal. Thank you, I managed. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know how to thank you enough. You can thank us by making sure your father lives. That's all the thanks we need. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and medical coordination. Dr. Okonkwo confirmed that Kevin Chen was a match. His heart was healthy and strong. The directed donation was approved. My father was prepped for surgery. I barely slept. I barely ate. I existed on adrenaline and the desperate hope that after 4 years of fighting, I was finally going to win. The morning of the surgery, I sat next to my father's hospital bed. He was already in his gown, and 4 dripping fluids into his arm. He looked small and pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were still sharp. "So this is it," he said. "This is it. You know, when I burned that letter, I thought I was doing the right thing. The hard thing. The thing a father is supposed to do. You were wrong. I know." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was weak, nothing like the crushing handshake I remembered from childhood. "But you were right. About everything. About MIT. About yourself. About me. You were right, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry it took me dying to admit it." "You're not dying. Not today. Maybe not. But if I do, I want you to know something." He squeezed my hand as hard as he could, which wasn't very hard at all. "You're the best thing I ever did, Reagan. The only good thing. Everything else, the construction work, the trailer, the years of beer and bitterness, that was all noise. But you were the signal. You were the one thing I got right." I leaned down and kissed his forehead, something I hadn't done since I was a child. His skin was cool and papery. "I love you, Dad. Now stop talking like you're going to die and let the nice surgeons do their job." He smiled, that real smile I'd seen for the first time on graduation day. "Bossy. Just like your mother." The surgery took 9 hours. I sat in the waiting room the entire time, surrounded by the Chen family. Emily was there, a slight girl with her brother's eyes and a quiet strength that reminded me of myself at her age. Her parents, middle-aged and hollowed out by grief, sat in the corner holding hands. "Your brother sounds like he was an amazing person," I said to Emily. "He was annoying and loud and he never cleaned his room." She smiled through her tears. "But he was also the kindest person I knew. He would have loved your story. The poker games. The hazardous waste. All of it. He would have said you were a total badass. I think he and I would have been friends." "Yeah." She wiped her eyes. "I think so too." At hour 7, Dr. Okonkwo came out to give us an update. "The transplant is going well. The new heart is in place. We're monitoring for rejection, but so far everything looks good." At hour 9, she came out again. This time she was smiling. "The surgery is complete. Your father is stable. The new heart is beating strongly. He's not out of the woods yet, there's still a risk of infection and rejection, but the hardest part is over." Emily burst into tears. Her parents held each other. And I, Reagan Cole, the girl who'd clawed her way out of Alabama with nothing but rage and a dream, fell to my knees in the middle of the hospital waiting room and sobbed like a baby. He made it. The stubborn old bastard actually made it. My father woke up 3 days later. I was sitting next to his bed, working on my laptop, when I heard a groggy voice say, "Is it done?" I looked up. His eyes were open, bleary but aware. "It's done. You have a new heart. A 24-year-old electrical engineering student named Kevin Chen gave it to you." He was quiet for a long moment. "Someone died so I could live. Someone died, and his family chose to give you his heart. They're in the waiting room right now. They want to meet you. I don't know what to say to them. How about thank you?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. That's a start." The meeting between my father and the Chen family was the most awkward and beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. My father, still groggy from surgery, tried to sit up in bed and almost fell over. Mr. Chen caught him and gently pushed him back against the pillows. "Don't move," Mr. Chen said. You'll ruin my son's handiwork. My father's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Mrs. Chen said. Kevin's heart is still beating. That's all the thanks we need. Emily stepped forward. Can I listen? To his heart? I mean, Kevin's heart? I just want to hear it. Dr. Okonkwo, who was standing in the corner, nodded. Emily leaned over and pressed her ear to my father's chest. She stayed there for a long time, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. It sounds just like him, she whispered. Strong and steady. He always had a strong heart. My father reached up and put his hand on her head. I'll take care of it. I promise. I'll take care of your brother's heart for the rest of my life. Emily straightened up, wiping her eyes. You better. Or I'll come find you. I don't doubt it. He looked at the Chen family, all three of them standing around his bed. I ain't a good man. I made a lot of mistakes. But I swear to you, I'm going to earn this. Every day I have left, I'm going to earn it. The recovery took months. There were setbacks, a minor infection, a scare with rejection, a week where my father's body seemed to be fighting the new heart with everything it had. But Buck Cole was too stubborn to die. The heart settled in. His color improved. His strength returned, slowly at first, then faster. By the end of the 3rd month, he was walking on his own. By the end of the 6th, he was taking short jogs around the apartment complex. I'd come home from work and find him in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes he'd seen on cooking shows. I'm making cocoa vin, he announced one evening, standing over a stove full of bubbling pots. It's French. I know what cocoa vin is. I went to MIT. Don't get smart with me. Hand me the time. I handed him the time. You know, you never cooked a day in your life before this. Turns out I like it. It's like construction, but with food. You follow the instructions, you get something good at the end. Does that mean I have to start calling you Chef Dad? Call me that and I'll burn your portion. The Chin family visited regularly. They became part of our extended family, the kind of bond that only forms through shared tragedy and shared hope. Emily started college in Boston, and she'd come over for Sunday dinners. My father would cook, and she'd tell us about her classes, and for a few hours, the world felt almost normal. One Sunday, about a year after the transplant, I found my father sitting on the apartment balcony, looking out at the Charles River. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. What are you thinking about? I asked, sitting down next to him. Your mother. I felt my heart clench. He almost never talked about her. What about her? She used to say you were going to change the world. I never believed her. Not because I didn't think you were smart enough. Because I didn't think the world would let you. I spent my whole life being beaten down by the world. I figured you would be too. He turned to look at me. I was wrong. You've been wrong about a lot of things. I know. He smiled, that real smile that still felt new every time I saw it. But I was right about one thing. What's that? You're the best thing I ever did. I leaned my head against his shoulder. His heartbeat, Kevin Chen's heartbeat, was steady and strong under my ear. You're not so bad yourself, I said. For a man who once burned my scholarship letter with a blowtorch. He laughed. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? Never. I'm going to tell that story at your funeral. Fair enough. He put his arm around me. Fair enough. We sat there in silence, watching the sun set over the Charles. My father, the man who'd told me not to waste money on my dreams. Me, the woman who'd proved him wrong by proving him right. And between us, an unspoken understanding that some things don't need to be said. Some things just are. Love. Forgiveness. Family. The ugly bouquet from graduation day was still in my apartment, pressed between the pages of my mother's astronomy textbook. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the day my father crashed my graduation in a stolen cherry picker with a fistful of dandelions and a heart full of regret. I remembered the look on his face when I told him I'd saved his life. I remembered the way he'd held me, after 4 years of silence, like he was never going to let go. And I remembered what he'd said to the Chen family, that first day after the transplant. I'm going to earn this. Every day I have left, I'm going to earn it. He did. Every day, for the rest of his life, he earned it. Buck Cole lived another 18 years with Kevin Chen's heart beating in his chest. He saw me get my PhD. He saw me lead my first spacecraft design team. He saw me get married, on a beach in California, to a man who made me laugh and never once told me my dreams were a waste of money. And on the day he died, peaceful and quiet in a hospital bed with me holding his hand, the last thing he said was this. "Tell Kevin's family I said thank you. And tell them I tried my best to earn it." He did. He absolutely did. As for me, I'm still here. Still building rockets. Still chasing stars. And every time I look up at the night sky, I think about my father, the stubborn old man who burned my scholarship letter because he loved me too much to be a burden. I think about my mother, who told me the stars were my future. And I think about Kevin Chen, the electrical engineering student whose heart gave my father 18 more years. Life is messy. Family is messy, eh? But sometimes, if you're very lucky and very stubborn, you get a second chance. You get to forgive. You get to be forgiven. You get to watch the sun set over the Charles River with your father's arm around your shoulders and know that everything, all of it, the pain and the rage and the struggle, was worth it. Every damn bit of it.